G'day legends and happy Friday. I hope that you are having a fantastic day and a couple of knockoff beers and that you're going to have a fantastic weekend. Look after yourself and your family out there. Now, we do have some big news of the day with a sinking of a ship. We're going to talk about the EU. We're going to talk about funding in Ukraine. And of course, then we'll have a look at the maps. We have a fair bit to go over today. Now, the keyboard special forces are definitely out in force today, trying to type cope as fast as they can with Russia losing an Ivanovet's, a Tarantul class corvette equipped with supersonic anti-ship missiles as well as anti-aircraft missiles, that this smaller warship was sunk. Now, many claim that this warship's only capacity was anti-ship, and that the anti-ship missiles can only be used for that role. And that actually is incorrect. Now, yes, the primary role of this is ship to ship, but these missiles, these 3 M80s, which we see on these side-borne magazines here, I guess you'd call it. Technically, is that a magazine? If we call it that, these can be used in a sea to surface role. These can be fired into surface. And we'll just see on this as well that the Mosket is a Soviet supersonic ramjet powered anti-ship cruise missile, that this the M80, but the air-launched variants, the KH-41, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So these can be used in that role. Same as we've seen, S-300 is typically in air defense, but it can be used in the role of surface to surface. Now, this ship was struck in Lake Denislav. So let's have a look at actually where this is. So, of course, this is Ukraine here. This is Crimea. Now, this is Lake Denislav in here. And it was said that it was struck just at the opening here, but exactly where it is, well, we haven't really got a good idea. To give you an idea where this is on the map, or the occupation map, is just in this Denislav here. So these drones have come somewhere from around here and have crossed in and struck somewhere here. Now, let's give a very, very rough estimate of how far. Let's go at least 250 kilometers. So the range on these drones is very impressive. So let's take a look at the footage and see what has happened. We have a few minutes of footage here. The good thing is, because this is footage against Russia, this video probably won't be demonetized. YouTube demonetized one way, they won't the other way. Interesting. Let's have a look here. Now, as we'll see, these drones coming in across choppy water, so the footage is up and down a little bit. We have a little bit of music, and we can see multiple strikes against this ship. It wasn't just one. This is many, many drones coming in aboard this ship. And of course, these cameras, this isn't going to be a 4K GoPro, but what we can see is this ship engaging these with machine guns, unsuccessfully, but maybe they took out some, but the ship is sunk, doesn't matter at that point. But this is what we've seen before, is what actual defense for these. Is there realistically ships in safety inside a harbor or engaging with machine guns? And we'll talk about why that is very difficult here. Now, on the side in these ships here, we see what I called then these magazines for these missiles. This is showing that it is this ship. And as you can see, this is a smaller ship. This isn't a massive warship here as well. But we'll talk about this as well. And you can see the already damaged side here, that they're aiming for that already soft spot here. And you will see later on in the video, you can see explosions happening here. You will see it listing to that side, what is where that is taking on water at that time. Here we go. More attempts to strike in this ship. You can see the ship is also doing evasive maneuvers to try and get away from these big warships. You can see too, you can see how the ship is turning, because look at the wake off the rear of the ship here. So the ship is trying to turn. These ships are faster and more maneuverable than people actually think. Just because they're so big, it doesn't look like it. You can see as well, this is where this strike has taken place previously. Aiming for soft spot. This looks like a James Bond mission from back in the day on like PS2. Bang, in that soft spot. Huge, massive explosion there. Many say that was then the magazine then exploding in the ship, so the onboard munitions then going up, causing a massive bang there. As well, you can see this drone as well trying to be engaged You can just see the speed and maneuverability of these. These drones, you can use a lot of like jet ski parts. If you've ever been a jet ski, highly maneuverable. It would be very difficult to shoot that off two moving platforms, especially as the ship is trying to do its own maneuvers. You can see here the ship is listing over, so tilting over. See another hit explosion. It is hard to put this together because we don't exactly know if these videos are in chronological order. And here we see basically Titanicing down as the front of the ship is almost vertical to the sky, and that ship being lost. A foreign ministry official for Ukraine, Alexander Shkurba, told the BBC at 0345 in the morning there was a first hit, and at 0400 the whole crew was evacuated already. So there was no chance at all that this vessel would be saved. We have no update on the fate of the crew, although this has not stopped every single online reporter stating that all hands were lost. There is no official Russian statement on this either, or footage if people actually got off that boat, but anyone that stayed on that as those explosions would have been lost. Now, the only thing we do have is from a very popular Russian Telegram channel here, that the 56-meter long vessel was caught in a trap 9 kilometers from the entrance of Lake Dunaslav near the village of Okachineva, Black Sea region. The first attack by unmanned ship occurred at 0342, so this lines up with what the minister was saying. The second at 344, and the third control attack around 347. According to internal data, at 0400, the crew stopped fighting for the survivability of the vessel and began evacuation. This lines up what the foreign minister was saying. At 0446, the ship sunk. According to official data, the crew of 32 people was evacuated, one seriously injured. Members was hospitalized. At the same time, the full crew was 39. So this is saying 39 were aboard, 32. So there are 7 currently unaccounted for if we go off what this large Russian Telegram channel says. That said, we don't know at all the fate of the crew. Now let's talk about the Black Sea Fleet. As many will say, this has crippled the Black Sea Fleet. It hasn't. This is the Black Sea Fleet overall. Now this is the Moskva. This was the flagship of the Black Sea. Now people are making out like this ship was like taking out that. And I can tell you that it isn't. So this is this ship here, and this is the Moskva. So very different ships. It's still important. I'm not saying it's not, but don't make out like it was the same as when the Moskva was then targeted. We're going to talk about more of how this will go into the future. So as we know, bloggers make their living off clicks and engagement, and I'm the same. So it is definitely in the interest of us as a whole to exaggerate and lean into one side, not only for engagement, audience, but also there's a monetary incentive. This is why people like Dennis have been telling us that for 2 years that Russia is on the verge of collapse, and Aiden is telling us that Ukraine is about to implode. And they've been doing this for the past 2 years. Truth is, there's still a lot of juice left to squeeze in this war, and both sides can fight for a long time. So this ship, this is a big loss for Russia. There is no doubt of this. Has it crippled their naval forces? No. This is a small corvette with a typical crew of 44. So not even a huge crew. And I'm not saying this isn't horrific when humans die. As you know, if you've seen any of my reporting, always from human life is very sacred and very important. But it's not like it's a crew of hundreds. And at this point, we are unsure even the status of that crew. And this is a ship built in the 80s. Now, for Ukraine, it shows that its tactics with the seaborne drones are working. And by the look of this video, they're actually even improving, working in groups, working together, and striking already damaged areas multiple times. And this reduces Russia's capacity in the Black Sea and takes away another asset of which it could have used against Ukraine, either firing missiles or in defense of other attacks. Now, importantly, this comes as a huge PR, propaganda, and morale boost for Ukraine, who over the past month, Ukraine has been losing a fair bit of ground on the front line, and international support has been very shaky, and people are putting in a lot of doubts. This comes at a good time for Ukraine. Ukraine needed a big win, and I think that is very important. Never underestimate how important a win like this is for morale. But like I said, let's not try and sell this like it's hitting the Moskva ship. This was a corvette. But I do believe that this is a bigger win for Ukraine than it is a loss for Russia. I don't know if that actually makes sense, but I hope that it does. Will this change the front line for Ukraine? No. But what it has done is it's shown more vulnerabilities in the Black Sea Fleet and how Russia has not yet developed a good strategy against these drones. And it has reduced the freedom of movement and force that Russia has in the Black Sea. And it potentially has taken away many more sailors who will have to be replaced and has a demoralizing effect on the Russian side. And the defense of Ukraine is estimating the ship to be worth somewhere around the $60 or $70 million. I'd say that's not the price of this ship. I'd say that's a replacement for this, as these aren't built anymore. And Russia will have to mobilize more men and resources to protect its fleet from more attacks like this. Now, how involved this ship was or wasn't in the war, there's some evidence showing that it's had very minimal use. This is beyond the point that this is a big loss for Russia, with the flow-on effects can be very large. But a change in the war from this? No. Similar to the effect we've seen from far more important ships that have been lost. But for me, I think this shows something far bigger and more costly for Russia. But one thing I haven't seen spoken about, and I think is far bigger than this and far more costly for Russia in terms of this war, is that if Russia wants to achieve its goals, hold this ground, it cannot let Ukraine keep Odessa or any controlled access to the Black Sea from more attacks like this. So let's have a look at the map. So of course we know these drones are being launched from somewhere down here, somewhere off the coast. That's where they are coming from. That if Russia want to stop this, they're going to have to somehow take Odessa and take more control down this coastline to stop these drones coming across and attacking ships in here. Now, how realistic is it that Russia could do this? Well, we don't know, but we know any attack like that at this stage of the war is going to be incredibly, incredibly costly. But I think that is what it's shown. If Russia wants to maintain control of the Black Sea, this fleet, they have to take away Ukraine's ability to do it. And I think that is what this has shown, more so than just the capability of taking out a corvette. With this, people will quickly point at the incompetence of the Russian forces with losing these ships. And with many Russian tactics, this pointing at incompetence is fair enough. But with these seaborne drones, these are absolutely deadly. And as you've seen in previous videos where I have talked and got responses from Western Navy officers, even they say there's no really good way to actually defend against these, the same as tanks and FPV drones, that this is ahead of the defense of them. And I think we'd be having very, very similar issues with these if we were in somewhere like the Black Sea Fleet. Now, has Russia had some incompetence losing ships? Yeah, absolutely. I won't say that there hasn't been, but realistically against these, what capability do we have against these drones? And we need to be looking over there and going, hey, countries are going to develop this, can be used against us. What do we actually have to use against this? And only this week, Vice Admiral Alexei Nespapa, who we talked about 3 or 4 days ago, of the Ukrainian Navy, has told Sky News the Navy needs warships because we understand there is no Navy without ships. What are you the Admiral of? But this is why, if such a decision is taken concerning the possibility of handing over 2 frigates to the Ukrainian Navy, we will be very happy. Of course, the UK is getting rid of 2 frigates and he's hoping to scoop them up. But I think these ships would probably suffer the same fate. And many are speculating that these drones in modern warfare will just reduce the effect of large ships, especially in a green or brown water navy. Now, for those unaware, there are 3 types of navies. There's a blue water navy, a green water navy, and a brown water navy. For those unaware, a blue water navy is one that can go in, like, say, the Pacific Ocean. They're bloody out here somewhere. US, aircraft carriers, submarines, and everything. Russia has a blue water navy, so does China. Many countries don't actually have a blue water navy. A green water navy is more around coastlines, ports, and a brown water navy is something that Australia has a lot of interest in, with a lot of our neighboring countries have a lot of like inland streams, like we see, what's that movie? Apocalypse Now on the boats in Vietnam. That is really your brown water navy. And the Black Sea Fleet is primarily a green water fleet with green water capacities, where we see things like hovercrafts. And I believe that these drones are going to have the biggest effect against the green water navies and down the line brown water navies as well. I think a blue water navy, which Ukraine just geographically will never have a blue water navy, like they don't need a blue water navy ever. That this is where they'll be the most protected from these drones, but in this we don't need to really talk about that. Now maybe out in the middle of the Black Sea will be considered blue water. I'm sort of unsure. I couldn't find an answer of it, but these drones have proven to be incredibly effective in this sort of shorter range here. So yeah, I think that's a long way around going, this is a big win for Ukraine. It's a big loss for Russia. Is it going to have a catastrophic effect on the front line? Maybe this bloody thumbnail or title will say, not overall. But it is interesting to look at and where our tactics will change down the line from this as well. Now, we spoke yesterday that the EU had an emergency meeting for the 50 billion euros that they're hoping to get unblocked for Ukraine, and that funding and the stability of the EU system realistically could have hung in the balance with Hungary's leader Viktor Orban having a veto, but also Brussels being able to remove Hungary's voting rights. Well, this money has gone through. So Orban has caved and agreed to let the money then flow into Ukraine. Now, this is 50 billion euros over 4 years, and this is primarily to help rebuild Ukraine. This is not military aid, and we're going to go over the restrictions on this money in a second. Zelensky said on Twitter, today the EU has made a long-awaited decision. This is a clear signal to Moscow that Europe will withstand and that Europe will not be broken. Zelensky also had a point at the US, which has stalled the $64 billion package to Ukraine in Congress. Now, people are saying that we're going to get a vote on this next week. In this announcement, he said, this would send a signal across the Atlantic that the international rules based on world order will withstand all challenges. Europe sets the tone for global affairs with its unity. Now, Orban also took to Twitter to reconfirm that none of Hungary's money will be flowing into Ukraine and that the money will be reviewed in 2 years. This is some of the restrictions on the money here. The mission accomplished, Hungary's funds will not end up in Ukraine, and we have a control mechanism at the end of the first and second year. Our position in the war of Ukraine remains unchanged, that we need a ceasefire and peace talks. And I was looking at this, and then I scrolled down, and the top comment, like an Andrew Tate. So across the border in Romania, support from Mr. Tate. But let's actually have a look at the video that Orban has released.
Csütörtök dél, ez itt Brüsszel, de már tegnap szerda éjjel hosszú órákon keresztül tárgyaltunk, és ma kora reggel kezdtük a tárgyalásokat. A téma az Ukrajna volt, illetve az a kérdés, hogy támogassa az Európai Unió Ukrajnát, és ha igen, hogyan és mennyi pénzzel. Tárgyalások itt szakadtak meg tavaly decemberben.
So last December, when Ukraine's accession talks happened and Hungary was asked to leave the room, that when he re-entered, he then blocked this money going through.
Két magyar problémára nem kaptunk megoldást. Féltünk attól, hogy a magyaroknak járó uniós pénzek, amit a bizottság eddig nem adott ide nekünk, előbb-utóbb Ukrajnába.
So that funds he's talking about is funds stuck up for Hungary as well and of minorities.
Kötnek majd ki. És attól is féltünk, hogy túl hosszú távra ellenőrizetlenül bocsátunk forrásokat Ukrajna rendelkezésére. Tegnap éjszaka, ma reggel kaptunk egy ajánlatot, és végül kitárgyaltunk egy ellenőrző mechanizmust, amely garantálja a pénzek észszerű felhasználását, és garanciát kaptunk arra,
guarantees of controls that Hungary wanted, therefore he has said yes, and that the money can move forward from there. Now, a very interesting thing in this as well, in this same meeting that's come out, is that the EU's chief diplomat, Joseph Borrell, said on Wednesday that the EU expected to reach just 52% of its target to send 1 million rounds to Ukraine by March this year. We spoke a little bit on that yesterday, but it was more allegations, where now that has come out and that is confirmed they have not then hit that target. But speaking of that money, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen denied any claim that Hungary had received any promises for them to release these funds, and France's Macron has said Hungary received no gift. Although this does come only days after Hungary, the Financial Times, claimed that Brussels had a plan to cripple the Hungarian economy if this then failed to pass. Let's have a look at what this money is actually for. To this end, the Commission proposes to create a new instrument, the Ukraine Facility. This facility would cater to both short-term state and recovery needs and medium-term reconstruction and modernisation of Ukraine. You can find all this on the EU website if you'd like. The key elements: Pillar 1 is financial support in the form of grants and loans to the state, of course, to Ukraine. Pillar 2, a specific Ukraine investment framework to attract and mobilise public and private investment in Ukraine. So if you own a European bloody bitumising company can go and fix some roads. Pillar 3, technical assistance and other supporting measures. The overall amount of the facility is proposed to be 50 billion from the point of 24 to 27 for all types of support. Although, as we know, Hungary has put forward after 2 years, this will be looked at and seen as how is this going. And can reconstruction really start in Ukraine when fighting is still ongoing? Active combat has remained largely contained in the south and east of the country, except for the missiles coming in, where the greatest extent of damage has been sustained. However, the broader economic and social impact of the war is extensive, affecting all of Ukraine. Supporting the recovery of the Ukrainian economy requires concerted efforts to help ensure that economic activity is sustained and basic infrastructure is repaired and maintained. Now, I think a big part of this will actually be getting people back into the country to work and pay tax and build this economy back up as well. As we know, it's going to need a hell of a lot more money than $50 billion. How will the EU monitor the use of funds, and what obligations will Ukraine have to respect on its side? People's concern is here that the corruption in Ukraine and the money we have seen disappear before, how will that actually be then looked after? And how do we know that that isn't just going to that Bob owns a bitumising company and he'll charge 5 times the price to bitumise this road and we're doing hand shandies all around? Anyway, the proposal is equipped with a strong system of audit and control set out in a multi-layer mechanism. First, the reform of the audit and control systems of the Ukrainian side will be needed as part of the reforms under the plan, same as reforms for Ukraine to eventually enter the EU. The Commission will include a framework agreement with Ukraine for the implementation of the facility, with legally binding arrangements for the management, control, supervision, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting and audit of funds under the facility. Ukraine will be obliged to publish the data on persons and entities receiving amounts of funding exceeding the equivalent of 500,000 euros for implementation of reforms investments specified under the Ukraine plan. I'll build your road for 499,000 euros. Anyway, the Commission will provide the European Parliament and the Council an annual assessment of the implementation of funds provided under the facility. The Commission will also carry out an ex-post evaluation of this regulation. So they're trying to have some control and monitoring this both before and after, as there are concerns, and these are real concerns. Like, people will just have this, oh no, it's fine. I love Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine. I think it's a great country. I think they're great people. I have a real soft spot for it. But to just say, no, there's no corruption. Well, look at all the stories of the Kiev Independent, the Kiev Post, these Ukrainian independent papers, even there, who are the most pro-Ukrainian places in the world, are publishing about all this fraud that is still happening in the tens and tens of millions of dollars. This still needs to be looked at. The best thing for Ukraine is to get rid of that corruption so things actually get built. That if a heap of people step in and steal just below 500,000 euros, well, then the roads and schools and reconstruction isn't happening. I'm on Ukraine's side when I point out the corruption, because I'm saying that needs to be cleared up to help the average person. And I'm not then saying that we don't have corruption here and all around the world as well. Take one look in the defense private industries and whew, it's sketchy. But what is the estimate of Ukraine's needs? According to the assessment, the estimate overall reconstruction needs in Ukraine over the next 10 years amounts to 384 billion euros, $410 billion, and 142 billion over the period of 23 to 27, being this same period. For 23 alone, the immediate fast recovery needs stood at 13 billion. In addition, 30th March, International Monetary Fund estimated state funding gap, financing gap up to 2027, reached $75.1 billion. It's a lot of money here. I actually have cut off in my crop, but just below here, it also said about the Russian assets that have been frozen using from this, that they're still trying to work on how they can free up those assets to be used. But I've cropped that out. Now, I've heard far higher figures than this. I've heard for higher figures than this and 100 years just for the demining operation. And we can't get an idea of these figures yet. We cannot get an idea of these figures yet. And I'll tell you exactly bloody why. We saw what happened to Mariupol when Russia occupied, the amount of damage that has been caused in there, the amount of just sheer everything damaged. Now, how much damage do you think is going to happen somewhere like Donetsk, Luhansk, back through Mariupol, back through Melitopol, Sevastopol? How much damage do you think is going to happen in these areas? Let's have a look on the map. These occupied areas coming through. So we cannot say yet how much this is actually going to be. I've heard figures thrown around of well over $1 trillion. That's not saying not to do it. I'm just saying it's hard to count your chickens before they hatch when there's still an ongoing operation, and damage will still be far probably exceeded any of that. If you've ever had anything to do with a government contract, just government contract is like when someone tells you their body count, just times it by 3. Anyway, let's then have a look at some maps. Now, deep state map, very, very few updates, but we will still have a look at what's going on. Now, here we have Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv, red areas occupied since 22 and the purple since 14. But I'd want to read this MOD a little bit first. I'm all over the place, as I got intel off someone that actually agrees with this from inside that group. So therefore, we know this is actually true. The Russian National Guard, Roskvarna, is incorporating 3 former Wagner assault detachments, the 15, 16, 17, into its volunteer corps formation. On 25th December 23, Russian president signed a law authorizing this to form its own volunteer formations. Roskvarna will likely deploy its new volunteer detachments to Ukraine and Africa. Roskvarna is reportedly offering volunteers 6-month contracts for service in Ukraine and 9-month contracts for service in Russia for far more money than just being a typical volunteer. The incorporation of former Wagner assault detachments into Roskvarna's volunteer corps highly likely indicates that Wagner has been successfully subordinated into Roskvarna, increasing Russia's state command and control over the Wagner group. Sort of. It has been renamed and rejigged into some ways, still operating very privately, but a lot of guys have swung across into these as well. If you'd like me to actually talk about this with some of the people that I speak to about this, let me know. I can do that for you. Now, there was some information that Ukraine had made a larger bridgehead down at Krinky here. Now, what we can see is that is probably not the case, as Deep State Map is showing that, if anything, it actually has lost a little bit of ground in here. And as we know, that area is just getting absolutely hounded. We've seen no change in Rob Whitney, no change up through into Mariinka, Vuhledar on the Deep State Map. But in Mariinka, we do have then this map update from Suryak. Situation west of Donetsk City, Russian army made new advances northwest of Mariinka, so saying out into these paddocks out here that they are making new advancements up to there. And of course, that will move faster than it will through somewhere like a town. Now, Avdiivka, we have no update from Suryak or Deep State on the center of Avdiivka, but what we do have near Pervomayski here is we do have this change here. So not saying that Russia has increased their control, but saying that Ukraine has actually had a decrease in the control here and an increase in grey zones. So from that, we say that Russia is attacking in that direction. No change up through Avdiivka, Bakhmut on these maps, but if we have a look in the north of Bakhmut, it's saying that the situation north of Bakhmut, Ukrainian army managed to recapture a tree line northwest of Borodnivka in here. And we did see that yesterday, that Ukraine had some more gains as well in here according to the map. So we know Ukraine has pushed down this road, down this train line, and now it's saying just in this tree line, see this spire out here, that Ukraine has managed to push that back. We know heavy fighting is still ongoing in that area. No changes up through the Kremenar forest. Then we come up into the north of Sinkivka, and what we do see is it does look like Russia lost some ground in here. Hasn't come under control, or else their sliver would turn blue there, but there has been an exchange of ground not being shown on the other maps. But in Sinkivka, which of course is here, very important area, Suryak has this to say: northeastern front, during the last hours, Russian army increased the attacks west of Sinkivka, forcing Ukrainian army to retreat in the direction of the Oskil River. We know this is a very, very important area. I believe these maps are very close now to what it is saying, but it's saying that it is increasing their attacks to try and get this 6 ways in here, also take Sinkivka, push back into the Oskil River, and eventually, of course, the goal will be this hub of Kupiansk here, but the front line is moving very slow in and around here. But legends, end of the week. I hope this one wasn't too long. I hope that it's enjoyable. I know it's very wordy with me, but that's just the way I do it. I'm interested in both the political side and the ins and outs of how some of that works as well. But I hope that you have a great day. If you'd like to support me, there's links below. There's merch, there's Patreon, there's probably OnlyFans at some point anyway. I'm sure there's enough pictures of me naked out there somewhere. But look after yourself, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.